Feelings of helplessness or hopelessness can be dark. They can be a terrible feeling of hopelessness, despair, um, almost debilitating. They can even be debilitating, uh, and it's a state that we just can't mess around with. It's too dangerous. We can't allow ourselves to sink into a hole like that. We need to get going. We need to get out of it. But how do you do that? How do you do that? Especially when sometimes um, we don't feel any motivation to do anything. Because after all, if it's hopeless and we're helpless, what's the point? Well, actually, there is a point. And I just want to talk about a couple of things worth considering here. First of all, what's the worst thing that could happen in this situation? What's the worst thing that could happen in this situation? I think we should look at that, just look at our situation and what's the worst thing that can happen? As painful as it could be, as painful as this is to even think about. I think we need to look at the worst thing and accept it. We need to think of the worst thing that could possibly happen and accept that yes, it could happen. And if it does happen, we can live with it. We can go on. Painful as that may be, it's an important step to take. We have to accept the very worst that it could happen. And if it does, God forbid, then we can live with it and it'll be okay. It'll be okay. We can even give thanks no matter what happens. Give thanks because all things work together for good with those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And sometimes there is a good there, that a good long-term benefit that we can't see. So we need to, that's also a possibility. But either way, the main thing is just look at the worst, accept that, yeah, that could happen, and be willing to go on anyway. The myth of Sisyphus comes to mind. The myth of Sisyphus is a story about a man condemned to push a rock up a hill for his entire life. And of course, the first normal human reaction to that would be possibly hopelessness and helplessness. It's a depressing situation. There's no end to it. But on the other hand, by changing the perspective on a situation like that, by saying, you know what, I have to push this rock up for the end of time, but I can find meaning in that. I can take pride in my pushing it up. And if we can find purpose in pushing, meaning in pushing that rock up the hill, then we can actually find a fulfilling life in that. However we do that, whether it's suffering, offering up our sufferings as a gift and a prayer for others, as a sacrifice for others, whatever it is, that's one way of approaching it. We can find meaning in our purpose. James, switching to another example, James, the apostle James was not of the apostles. He was not ambitious. He was not seeking power or glory, but was in fact just content to be a disciple. This is super insightful, because when we seek power and glory for ourselves, it can put a weight on our shoulders, a burden. It burdens us. And ultimately what James decided was that was not his focus. And when we're willing to not focus on our own power and glory, but rather on just serving others, putting others first, then I think it takes a great burden off us. And when we do serve others, it gives us a certain amount of joy, and it puts our focus where it should be. Now, one thing as we're fighting these battles, because a lot of things can come into our mind, we can be a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts, a lot of possibly negative inner dialogues. We have to be really on guard for this kind of thing and keep the right focus. one thing to keep in mind is that you are greatly loved by Jesus Christ. No matter what your circumstances is, you're greatly loved by Jesus Christ. How much were you loved? For one thing, he made you. For another thing, you were loved by him so much that he came down here and died for you on the cross. He was nailed to the cross and resurrected, and he did that for you that you could be saved, And it's up for us to take the next step and accept that sacrifice and respond to it. But know that you're greatly loved. You're greatly loved. You were chosen out of a billion possibilities that he could have taken to create a new person. So we're in sometimes when we're feeling feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, it's like we're in a dark valley, a valley of the shadow of death. One person who was in such a valley like that was named Viktor Frankl, who was in the Nazi concentration camps in World War II. He was a psychologist. Viktor Frankl, one thing he noticed was that certain people would just die as soon as they gave up hope. You can't give up hope. You have to keep hope, because he noticed some people, once they lost hope, they would die sometimes within 24 or 48 hours, sometimes even less. They would just lie down and die because they had no hope and they were weak. But he also found that those who had purpose, their chances of surviving were much greater. So he felt we need to know what our purpose is. Why are we? There has to be meaning in our sufferings. There has to be meaning and purpose. So we need to know what is our purpose, and then we can go through any suffering. We can endure virtually anything if we have purpose and a meaning. However, we still have one speed bump we're going to run into on this road of getting out of the valley of the shadow. And what this is to get out of a valley like that, or to get out of any tough situation, can sometimes, especially when we're feeling helpless or hopeless, it's gonna take some effort, and when we're feeling helpless and hopeless, that it's at times like these that we have the least amount of reserves in order to for a Herculean effort, in order to rise out of a grim, what we see as depressing circumstances, if that's exactly what's needed. But the good news is this: we can do it. We can do it through small goals, literally by taking little baby steps. And this is not a weak approach. Indeed, this is virtually an indomitable approach. So don't think tiny little steps is a weak approach. It's not. It's the indomitable approach. However, there's a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, pray for help. Now, Asa in the Bible prayed for victory before battle, and we need to do the same thing. Asa said, Lord, victory is nothing with your help. So he prayed for God's help in the battle. And that we need to do the same thing, because if ask and ye shall receive. Now, then we have to take action. In the Bible, Haggai, in the rebuilding of the temple, he urged the people to just start building. They couldn't wait for the blessing. They needed to just start the work. And then he believed that God would, once they started the work, then that God would show up and they would be blessed. Now, a third character in the Bible that we can learn from is Asael. Extremely known for his courage. He was a conspicuous fighter. He was one of David's 30 heroes, and he was known for his speed. So once we map out small goals, and in other words, what we need to do is we may have a Herculean task ahead of us, but that's not a concern at all. Even if we're weak, even if we feel totally weak and helpless and hopeless, and the reason why is because we aren't going to worry about the big goal. We're going to divide that big goal into 100 tiny little goals, and then we're just going to focus on one tiny little goal. That's it. and do that one tiny little step. Take one little baby step. And once we do that, we'll take another one. We can do that. The smallest steps. And then months, years later, we become an unstoppable force. An unstoppable force. So, but as Asiel shows us, known for his conspicuous courage, he was also known for his speed. We need to take action. We need to find a tiny, small goal, but we need to take decisive action. We need to be speedy about getting going and just keeping going, one step at a time, one little step at a time. And momentum has a way of building. So, a few things to keep in mind. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And, like a ship in a storm looking for a landing. When he sees in the distance, when they see in the distance, they see that glimmer of the lighthouse through the fog. They know that there's hope ahead, and that's where we are right now. So thanks for listening.